The courier who handed me the box of legal documents had a look of pity in his eyes. He had no idea. The box was heavy, thick with the sheer physical weight of a war one was losing. I stood there on my own land, the afternoon sun warm on my face, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the ancient oak tree behind me. The same oak tree my great-grandfather had planted. And at my feet, stretching across the rich pasture land, was a deep, ugly scar of upturned earth, massive boulders, and felled trees, a barricade I had built with my own hands. Beyond it, a ribbon of pristine black asphalt lay silent and empty, a road to nowhere. A road they had built through the heart of my ranch. I ripped open the box. The cover page was dense with formal, intimidating text. But a few words jumped out at me in bold print. Lawsuit for damages and injunctive relief. They were suing me. They had trespassed on my land, torn up my heritage, paved a road through it without my permission, and now they were suing me for blocking it. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me speechless. My hands began to shake, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it felt like the ground was tilting beneath my feet. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they had one. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. To understand this lawsuit, this road, this war, you have to understand this land. My name is Daniel Miller, and my family has been on this ranch for 102 years. My great-grandfather staked his claim. Here, when this valley was nothing but open country and sky, he built the original stone house with his own hands, raised his family here, and was buried here. Under that same ancient oak tree, my grandfather took over after him, surviving the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression through sheer grit. And came my father, who taught me how to mend a fence, birth a calf, and read the weather in the clouds. Now it's my turn. This ranch isn't just a piece of property to me, it's a living, breathing history book. Every fence post has a story. Every scar on the barn door is a memory. This is my legacy, my identity. It's a hard life, this life. The days are long, the work is back-breaking, and the profits are slim. But the reward is a sense of peace, a connection to something real and enduring that I don't think you can find anywhere else. That peace began to die about 5 years ago. A massive development company from out of state bought up the 1,000 acres of ranch land that bordered my eastern pasture. In its place, they built Canyon View Estates. It was a different world, dropped into the middle of mine, a world of identical. Beige mini-mansions with 3-car garages and lawns so perfect they looked like CGI, and the undisputed queen of this new, artificial world was Agnes. Agnes was the HOA president, a retired corporate executive who moved to the country not to enjoy its quiet beauty, but to reshape it in her own image. She saw the world as a spreadsheet, a series of assets and liabilities to be managed for maximum return. My ranch, with its weathered barn, its grazing cattle, and its century of authentic, its unmanicured history, was, in her eyes, a massive liability. Our first real conversation was a perfect preview of the war to come. She drove her silent white Tesla up my long graveled driveway and met me by the barn, looking at my dusty boots and sweat-stained shirt with a look of clinical distaste. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice smooth and polished like a river stone. "I am Agnes, the president of the Canyon View HOA. I'm here today with an exciting proposition. The board has authorized me to make you a very generous offer to acquire your charming, but clearly unproductive, parcel of land. We see a real opportunity for a Phase 2 expansion that would greatly benefit the entire community." The offer she gave me wouldn't have paid for one of the marble countertops in her kitchen. It was an insult. "Agnes," I said, trying to be polite, "this ranch isn't for sale. It's my home. It's been in my family for 100 years. A friendly corporate facade cracked, just for a second. The smile remained, but her eyes went cold as a winter morning. "That's a very sentimental position, Mr. Miller," she said. "But sentiment doesn't pave roads or increase property values. You are standing in the way of progress and community safety. That is not a wise position to be in." It was a threat, wrapped in the language of a business negotiation. I didn't know it then, but she had already found her weapon. The catalyst was a small brush fire. Miles away on the far side of her development, it was contained quickly, but the sight of smoke in the distance sent the residents of Canyon View into a panic. Their single winding entrance road became a bottleneck, a chaotic traffic jam of expensive SUVs, all trying to evacuate at once. No one was ever in any real danger, but the incident gave Agnes the ammunition she needed: safety, security, emergency access. A week after her insulting offer, she was back. This time her tone was different. No more pretense of friendliness. The county fire marshal has determined that our community requires a secondary emergency access road, she stated flatly. The most logical, direct, and cost-effective route is through your property. We are prepared to make you a final, statutory offer for a 50-foot wide strip of your land. The offer was still a joke. I refused again. This time the mask came off completely. You are being selfish and reckless, she spat, her voice tight with fury. You are putting the lives of hundreds of families at risk for your own sentimental nonsense. This is not over. I will find a way. And she did. A week later, a thick, intimidating envelope arrived from the HOA's law firm. It informed me that their legal team, in a review of the county's historical property records, had uncovered a valid recorded utility and public access easement that crossed the northern corner of my property. The letter stated that, as was their legal right, they would be commencing work to improve and clear the easement to create their emergency access road. Work would begin in 30 days. My blood ran cold. An easement? I scrambled to my father's old office, to the dusty filing cabinet where a century of family records were kept. I tore through the files, my hands shaking. And then I found it. A brittle, yellowed document from 1928. The original deed transfer from my great-grandfather to the county for the main road. And there, in dense, archaic legal script, was a section granting a 50-foot easement across our northern pasture. It was a right-of-way, connecting the main road to the old logging trails in the hills. My heart sank. It was real. How could my family not have known? How could I not have known? It felt like a betrayal, a ghost from my own family's past, rising up to help my enemy. The 30 days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and frantic, useless calls to my small-town lawyer. He confirmed that the easement appeared to be legally binding. It was a public access right-of-way, and there was very little I could do. And then they arrived. A convoy of heavy machinery roaring up the road. Bulldozers, graders, massive dump trucks. They were led by a smug-looking foreman who presented me with a work order signed by the HOA. Despite my protests, I pleased to wait. They started there. I stood on the hill by the old oak tree and watched as the first bulldozer bit into the earth. I watched them tear up the pasture where I had played as a boy, the same pasture where my grandfather had taught my father how to ride a horse. They ripped through the land, carving a deep, ugly wound in the gentle slope of the hill. The sound of the diesel engines was a roar that drowned out the peaceful sounds of my home. Each scrape of the metal blades felt like it was scraping against my own bones. I felt a helplessness so profound it was like drowning. This was my land, my heritage, and I was forced to stand by and watch as it was brutalized, all because of tea. A piece of paper signed a century ago? The work took 2 weeks. They were brutally efficient. They graded a road, laid a gravel bed, and then the final insult, they paved it. A pristine black asphalt road, complete with painted yellow lines. Now cut a scar across my green pasture, a permanent monument to my defeat. Almost immediately, the residents of Canyon View began using it. It's not for emergencies, but as a convenient shortcut to town. The quiet solitude of my ranch was shattered by the constant whine of expensive cars. Speeding past my home, Agnes had one. She had taken a piece of my past and paved it over to serve her present. I was at my lowest point, defeated, violated, humiliated. I spent my days in a haze of anger and despair. And then, late one night, unable to sleep, I found myself back in my father's office, staring at that brittle, yellowed easement document from 1928. I had read it a dozen times. But in my panic, I had focused only on the part that granted the right-of-way. This time, I read it differently. I read it slowly. I read every single word. It was a document from another time, a time of horses and cattle, not Teslas and subdivisions. And the language was specific. Saw a phrase I had glossed over before. This easement is hereby granted for the sole, an exclusive purpose of driving of livestock from pasture to the open range. My breath caught in my throat. Driving of livestock wasn't a public access easement. It wasn't for utilities. It was a cattle path. My great-grandfather hadn't given the county a right-of-way for cars. He had given his fellow ranchers a way to move their herds. And then I saw it. The final, beautiful, glorious sentence of the paragraph. The part my lawyer had missed. The part their high-priced Houston lawyers, in their arrogance, had clearly missed. A reversionary clause. Should this easement at any time be improved, graded, paved, or used for any purpose other than the aforementioned driving of livestock, all rights and privileges granted herein shall be immediately and permanently extinguished, and the easement shall revert in its entirety to the grantor or his heirs and assigns. The world, which had been gray and bleak, suddenly exploded into brilliant color. The air in the dusty office seemed to crackle with electricity. They hadn't just used an easement. They hadn't just built a road. With the very first scoop of dirt, with the very first drop of asphalt, they'd committed the one act that legally destroyed their own right to be there. They had handed me the gun and loaded it for me. My anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I fired up my old John Deere tractor. I spent the entire day moving heaven and earth. I used the front-end loader to drag massive multi-ton boulders from the creek bed and place them across the road. I used my chainsaw to fell the ancient half-dead oak trees, dropping them perfectly across the asphalt. I pushed tons of earth and rock, creating a barrier so massive and impassable it looked like a natural disaster. When I was done, their beautiful new road was completely, utterly, and undeniably blocked. And that is what led to the courier, the lawsuit, and the moment I stood on my lawn, holding the legal declaration of a war they had already lost. The preliminary injunction hearing was a scene straight out of a movie. On one side of the courtroom, Agnes sat with a team of 3 slick, expensive-looking lawyers from Houston. They were confident, smug, whispering to each other and smirking in my direction. On the other side, it was just me in my cleanest boots and my one good suit and my small-town lawyer. A man named Dave, who looked as nervous as I felt. Their lawyer went first. He presented the judge with the recorded easement, poster-sized aerial photographs of their beautiful, life-saving new road. He then showed pictures of my illegal and malicious blockade, painting me as a bitter, backwards old rancher, dangerous vigilante who was holding an entire community's safety hostage. He spoke of progress, of public good, of the needs, of the many outweighing the sentimental whims of the one. He was good. He was convincing. I saw the judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, nodding along, her expression growing more and more grim as she looked at me. It felt like I was being convicted before my lawyer even had a chance to speak. Then, it was Dave's turn. Pale, but his voice was steady as he walked to the podium. "Your Honor," he began, "we are not here today to dispute the existence of the 1928 easement. In fact, we are here to affirm it." A confused murmur went through the other side of the courtroom. Agnes looked at her lawyer, a puzzled frown on her face. "My client, Mr. Miller, with the utmost respect for the legal agreements made by his ancestors," Dave continued, "he simply asks that the plaintiff, the Canyon View, HOA, do the same." He then placed a certified, enlarged copy of the original 1928 document on an easel, right in front of the judge. "Your Honor, if you would direct your attention to Section 3, Paragraph 2, he pointed with a pen, "The easement is granted," and I quote, "for the sole and exclusive purpose of the driving of livestock. It is not a public access easement. It is not a utility easement. It is, for all intents and purposes, a cattle trail." The judge leaned forward, her eyes scanning the old cursive script. The lead HOA lawyer stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The intent of the easement is clearly access." "Let him finish, Counselor," the judge said, her eyes still glued to the document. "And now, Your Honor," Dave said, his voice ringing with a newfound confidence, "if you would please direct your attention to the final sentence of that same paragraph, the reversionary clause."
Oh?
He pointed again, and I quote, "Should this easement at any time be improved, graded, paved, or used for any purpose other than the aforementioned driving of livestock, all rights and privileges granted herein shall be immediately and permanently extinguished, and the easement shall revert in its entirety to the grantor or his heirs and assigns." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a deep, profound silence, the kind you feel in your bones. The HOA lawyers were frantically shuffling through their own copies, their faces a mask of dawning, horrified comprehension. Agnes had gone completely white. Dave let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the final, killing blow. "Your Honor," he said, turning to face the judge, "the moment the Canyon View HOA's bulldozers broke ground on that road, they weren't building on an easement. They were committing felony trespass. The moment they poured that asphalt, they weren't creating a community asset. They were building an illegal structure on my client's private land. Their own actions, Your Honor, extinguished the very right they are now suing my client for obstructing. This isn't their road. It never was. We are not here to defend against their lawsuit. We are here today to file a counterclaim, demanding that the plaintiff, at their sole expense, remove their illegal structure and restore my client's land to its original, natural condition." The judge leaned back in her chair. She looked at the document. She looked at the pale, sweating faces of the HOA's legal team. She looked at a shell-shocked Agnes, and then she looked at me. And for the first time, a slow, wide smile spread across her face. The judge threw out their lawsuit so fast, it was like it had never existed. She granted our counterclaim in full. The Canyon View Estates HOA was legally ordered by a court of law to pay for the complete removal of the brand new, multi-million-dollar road they had just built. And then, to pay for the complete ecological restoration of my pasture. The financial blow was catastrophic. The special assessment they had levied to build the road was now doubled to pay for its destruction. The residents were furious. Agnes was publicly disgraced, a pariah in the community she had tried to rule. She was voted out of the presidency in a vicious emergency meeting. The road is gone now. The rumble of heavy machinery came once more, but this time it was the sound of healing, of my land being made whole again. The asphalt was torn up and hauled away. The gravel bed was removed. My pasture, though scarred, is now covered in fresh topsoil and seeded with native grasses. It will take years to fully recover, but the land endures. This whole brutal chapter taught me a lesson that was as old as the land itself. People like Agnes, people who are obsessed with progress and control, they only look at the surface of things. They see a dirt track and think they can pave it. They see a piece of history and think they can erase it. They never bother to dig deeper, to understand the story, the purpose, the fine print that lies just beneath their feet. Agnes tried to pave over my past, only to have the foundation of that same past rise up and completely shatter her future. The new grass is starting to grow back on the pasture, and it's a beautiful sight. But the new HOA president is a land developer from California, and he's just petitioned the county to re-examine the original 1920s survey for my entire ranch, for possible eminent domain opportunities, for critical public infrastructure,